Hi everyone, it's Pete here from the Pain Toolkit, and first and foremost, Happy New Year to everyone. And because we've got this COVID business still with us, be safe, keep your distance and stuff like that. Hey, listen, this is the first interview of 2021. I'm really pleased to say I've got a couple of young ladies with me today who's we're gonna do a recording on about endometriosis and the work that's around VR, virtual reality. So can I introduce you to, first off, to Eugenie Lee. Hello, it's good evening to you, Lee, Eugenie, because you're down here in sunny Australia.
Yeah. Hello. It's 9 o'clock in the evening and feeling still fresh.
You look, well, yeah, you're looking good for me, baby. Listen, and good morning to you, Katie. We're stuck here in a frozen UK.
Morning, Pete.
Okay. So listen, the battle plan really for today, guys, is that Katie's going to do a little bit of a chat with Eugene about her journey and whatnot, and then I'm going to sort of come back a little bit around the VR stuff, because that's the stuff I'm interested in, endo and also the VR stuff. So, Katie, can I hand over to you to ask Eugenie about the journey and whatnot?
Yeah, of course, Pete. That's great. Lovely to meet you, Eugenie. We've had a few sharing of conversations over Twitter recently, and as Pete said, your really exciting latest development. But so I've had a little look through your bio, and I'm really hopeful that you'll be able to just talk us through a little bit about your journey right from the endometriosis pathway that you had, and how that happened and how you became aware of it all.
Yeah, sure. Well, my creative journey started with my own lived experience with endometriosis, adenomyosis, and autoimmune disease. And that was just almost 3 decades ago now. The challenge of building a career as an artist whilst living with long-term medical disability, it has become a defining motivation for my art practice. I mean, if you live with such a harrowing and all-consuming pain, it is natural for you to want to find out more about it. But there are a lot of research sort of going towards endometriosis and pelvic pain these days. But about 2 decades ago, even, there wasn't a lot of information out there. So I actually had to do my own research. And that was actually quite difficult because I kind of felt quite abandoned by my clinicians. And it took such a long time to be diagnosed by my gynecologist. And I actually found out about endometriosis while I was watching news. And they were talking about, oh, there's this strange woman's disease that nobody's ever heard of. It's called endometriosis. And that sort of clicked something in me. And so I made another appointment to see my specialist a few weeks later. And I asked him, do I have endometriosis? Do you think all the symptoms we've been, looking into and exploring, could it be? And he said, yeah, maybe. And then since then, yeah, so I feel like I've self-diagnosed my own illness. And then he said, oh, okay, well, let's do a laparoscopy. And so I did my first laparoscopy in about year 2000. And it was very quick, in and out. And he said, okay, yeah, you do have endometriosis. And apparently he just closed it all up and said, okay, make another booking for another laparoscopy and we'll just burn it all off. It just wasn't very good. And then after a few laparoscopy, and he actually said, there's nothing else I can do for you. So why don't you just go and explore like alternative medicines or things like that? So that's when I started doing my own research, and I sort of got passed along from one specialist to the other. And my pain issue didn't resolve until I started my artist residency to work with Professor Lorimer Mosley at Body and Mind in 2014. And until then, in between that time, I explored my own invisible, unshareable, and private experience of endometriosis through paintings and sculptures and installations. So it was all about my own experience that I wanted to share to others, because there is no language to explain pain or to share your own experience. And nobody actually told me about the social psycho components. Everything was all bio. So naturally, I was only looking into bio. And so I've been chasing
Yeah,
smoke
not
basically
an
until
unusual
then.
story, is it? I mean, but that's
Yeah.
fascinating that you managed to use your art and that you ended up with Prof. Mosley. Brilliant. So yes, so tell me a little bit more about that and how that
Yeah.
worked.
So I got a residency grant to work with Lorimer's team, and instantly, when I flew up to Adelaide to join his team, they didn't question my experience. They just accepted it as it was, and that was actually quite a new sensational experience for me, because until then I sort of had to justify my own experience, even though I looked okay. But so many people have questioned my illness, and I just didn't know how to explain that either, through verbal language. But when I joined Body and Mind, they said, okay. They were happy to share the latest pain science they were working on. And it was almost like a one-on-one neuroscience crash course, because a lot of PhD students were working on the Lorimer, and they all sat down one-on-one with me, went through all their own individual research with me and teaching me at the same time. And while they were doing it, I think they were also practicing how to communicate science in plain language for
Yeah.
someone like me to
So,
understand.
so sorry, was that the first time you felt anyone had actually listened and believed you?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's a long journey, isn't it?
yeah. And I cannot thank them enough. I still remember how they made me feel. And I think the real turning point was Professor James Macaulay was there on my first time working with Body and Mind. And Lorimer took all of us out to this retreat in a countryside for 1 week. And James was there. And then while we were all having group lunch together, he just happened to say, oh, yeah, your pain, yeah, it's going to get better. Yeah, it will. And then he sort of moved on with some other conversation. And that sentence stuck with me. And that, I think it just changed my pain experience. I mean, everyone else there who helped me along and validated and everything was just so valuable. But that sentence meant so much, because his background with his knowledge on pain, and I felt like he knew about my pain more than I did, because I just assumed this is a classic placebo effect, right? I just had so much trust in him with his knowledge. And for him to say that I will get better, and I thought, I will get better. And I believed it. And I actually worked towards making myself better. So this pain management actually started from that moment. And then, a year later, I've been thinking about, oh, I have to thank James. I have to thank James. I don't know how to say it because it means so much to me. I don't know how to bring it up. And then when I actually finally saw James a year later, we were walking on the street. And then I said, James, I need to tell you something. And remember when you told me I'll get better? I feel better. And he said, what are you talking about? And he didn't remember a thing. but still,
That's
that just stuck with me.
Yeah, and so you have that listening experience that believed you're in an environment that understood that sort of pain presentation, but how did you actually get onto that self-management and decide, and what did you do? I think people would like to know.
Um, I studied Lorimer's Explain Pain. I highlighted it and I memorized, and then I actually thought about how can I share this, how can I disseminate this important knowledge? Because I know that Australians' neuroscience of pain is so advanced. Yet, people like me, like patients out there, they're not getting this. It's just some of the most important knowledge are rarely trickled down to people who need it the most. So from then onwards, I actually thought, okay, this is actually my job. I felt like I owe it to fellow patients. I don't want to call myself patients, but other fellow people, these people who's been living with pain for such a long time. And I wanted to share this knowledge. And not only that, I think I actually thought that I want to change the culture of pain. And I think pain science was the key, because that was the key for me. And I wanted to make sure that somehow pain science translates into humanizing knowledge. Um, and so combination of my own experience and my conviction in pain science somehow helped me along to manage my own pain better.
Brilliant.
Does it make sense?
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. And then so perhaps we'll go over to Pete to talk about your latest very exciting development and what you've been up to.
Can I just say before we go on to that, I'll tell you what, you're like listening to you now, Eugenie, it's like listening to a female version of me and my journey. You know, because that's how I was, and it was for me. My turning point was listening to Amanda Williams. She's a clinical psychologist. She used to work at the Input program in London, and she came along and spoke to the back pain group about it. And you know what she was telling the group about what happens on a pain management program. That was my, you know, that light bulb moment. And on the very first day of the program, you know, Charles Piver, the medical director there, he said to all of the people in the group, "We believe your pain." And you're thinking, it's like, because up until then you think you're a bit bonkers really, because the GP really is sceptical about you. The consultants I'd seen, orthopedics consultants, it's like they were being brushed away and stuff like that. But for someone to say that to you, that to me, I knew I was in the right place, you know. So it sounds a little bit like your job. Well, this is the same thing I get. I don't know about you, Eugene, but this is the same. Your story is similar to what I hear from everyone. Really, like, you know, is that they got stuck. They happen to, you know, get in, you know, brush, you know, their life with someone who understands it, like Lorimer and all the other dudes down there in Australia and whatnot. And it's like someone tearing down a wall and thinking, it's like being re-empowered. I don't know if you can, you know, you dig that, like, you know, that's something for you. It's, you know, as I said, you're like a female version of me, and it's, for me, I knew then that I had to tell other people about my experience. And hey, listen, you don't have to keep taking all these drugs. Do you know what? You can actually do things for yourself, you know.
You both escaped that medical model that you were forced into at one point.
Exactly, their old medical model, which is it's great for acute stuff and whatnot, but when it comes to pain, it is as much use as I call it a chocolate ashtray on my motorcycle.
You know, like even the knowledge of taking opioid drugs, I used to take heaps all the time. My GP used to just hand me all sorts of different types of opioid drugs. And again, with body and mind, like during just lunch conversations again, they were saying, oh yeah, opioids, they make pain worse. And then they just moved on to another conversation. I said, oh, hang on a minute, bring it back. What did you just say? You know, that conversation was in 2014. And to them, that was passe. That knowledge, that news was so passe. But to me, that was brand new, revolutionary thing. I thought, oh my God. And then after many years, you hear all about opioid drug making things worse and things. And I'm going, you know, this is old news. You know, there has to be some kind of like better communication between these amazing pain researchers and what they're doing and the general community. You know, that it takes that many years for them to connect somehow. it really doesn't make sense.
No, and even though that knowledge is now out there, it's still hard, not being communicated well enough with here with our GPs and within the community. It's and then trying to get the support when we're trying to get people to reduce their opioid, and it's still a huge problem.
Yeah,
Tricky one.
unfortunately,
Hey, Eugenie, tell me about all this. Listen, I'm really into VR. I'm really digging it. You know, to me, I think it's a new way of getting people involved in pain management. So tell me a little bit more about what you're doing with the VR business.
Okay, so I'm just gonna give you a brief introduction, like how I got into VR. Again, it was thanks to Body and Mind. Until I joined their team, I was just doing, more of a traditional mediums of painting and installation and things like that. And then when I joined the team, they were actually trying to study our brains and its relationship of how the brain actually responds and also change the way we experience pain. And they were using technology like virtual reality, mediated reality, and all sorts of other devices to sort of find like almost like a experimenting on therapeutic methodologies. And that just blew me away. Some of the stuff they were doing was just phenomenal. And I never thought that a scientist could actually change my art form, but it did. They single-handedly changed not only me as a person or living with pain, but they changed my career. Um, so, so initially, I actually created an artwork on CRPS. Um, it was a collaboration with Dr. Tasha Stanton and Valeria Bellan. And in a way that I really, really wanted to honor what they were doing. So I decided to stick to the materials that they were using in a lab, but somehow tweak it. So instead of turning it into a therapeutic artwork, which doesn't really suit me anyway, but flip it in a way to actually give pain to people. One of the reasons that I've decided to do that is because I had this dying wish for other people to just understand. People say, only if you could understand what I'm experiencing, only if you could just experience this, then you may not say that or you may not do this. Your response towards me will be somewhat different. So it was just based on that. So I wanted to just give a very safe way of offering or provoking pain to people who don't actually live with pain. So that's how my interest in VR came about. And then ever since that, I was just like, I was hooked in virtual reality. It was just amazing how our brain can actually respond to VR so differently compared to something like, like a really large screen. Our brain just doesn't respond to that compared to VR. I don't know what it is. So it's such a special material. So going talking about my latest artwork about pelvic pain. It took a while for me to decide to create an artwork about pelvic pain because it's just so close to my heart. And at the same time, I needed some space for me to distance myself from my own experience. And instead, I wanted to incorporate other lived experiences so that it's not only one person's subjective experience in combination with pain science, but it's more of a holistic conversation, including other lived experiences that are so valuable. And if somehow find a common language from that with pain science and combining it together, then it somehow becomes subjective, objective knowledge, so to speak. So this pelvic pain project is basically that I'm inviting participating audiences to come and strap on this pelvic pain inducing belt and put on VR goggles, and I give them a challenge, very simple challenge, to play a virtual ball game. And while they are playing these virtual ball games, the haptic belt kicks in. So it's going to start giving you shooting pain, hammering pain. Somebody also even said kettle prodding pain. Or there's a very common expression saying that it's almost like somebody's punching your back with the sharp knuckles. Some things like that. And then basically I'm just asking them, can you do such a simple thing as hitting the ball game while you're experiencing this? So the story came about. The reason I decided to do that is because my collaborating scientists, Susan Evans, Emeritus Professor Rolly Sussex, who is also a linguist from University of Queensland, and also Dr. Claire Ashton James from Sydney Uni. We thought, instead of focusing on such a harrowing, heartbreaking stories that we have collected from women living with pelvic pain, we wanted to make it a little bit more upbeat, slightly approach the story of pelvic pain in a more indirect way, so that people can have their own self-reflections afterwards. There's no point telling them such a harrowing, sad stories, because Claire, who is also an empathy expert, she warned us that if you actually push the empathy too far, then you can actually repel people. And that was the last thing we wanted to do. So we want to sort of invite people. So it's a sort of like a fun challenge. And it worked. It worked really well. And yeah, I forgot what else I was going to say.
That sounds it. Do you know what you're saying there, Eugene, about trying to explain the person's pain, like my pain, try and explain that to someone that's never experienced that sort of pain. It's I think healthcare professionals have used like a number scale, colours and stuff like that, but I've never been sold on the idea that they actually get that. But the idea of actually someone experiencing a pain, because, with acute pain, as it sort of comes, you get it and it sort of goes. But with long-term pain, it's like they say it's like a bit of useless pain. It's trying to tell you there's something wrong with you, but there isn't. It's just something, like people have a limb off or something, like a leg off, but their foot still hurt, still gets pain, like, although it's not there, and I think it's that pain, for our pain, it sort of gets that intense, it becomes part of our blueprint, sort of etched in our nervous system, and trying to describe that to someone, it can be challenging, like, so I'm really liking this idea, because at least it'll give someone other, especially healthcare professionals, better an idea when we say it feels like we're being, I know they call it, a lot of them call it catastrophizing, when you say it feels like being kicked in their back by a horse, or when was the last time that happened, sort of thing. So us lot, we tend to use language that probably may not be that helpful, because I remember years ago a pain nurse said to me, "How's your pain today?" I said, "Oh, I don't know, it feels like someone is drilling a hole in my hip." And she said, "Well, when was the last time someone done that?" And of course, I never had it, but that's all the way I could describe to someone, as someone actually drilling a hole in the hip, like, But I'm really,
Yeah, that's right. Like the use of language can be just so interesting, right? The Elaine Scarry in her book, the what's that book? The Pained Body or something, I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't
Pardon
remember.
me. But she does mention about, talking about pain through a straightforward manner of language is extremely difficult. It's pretty much impossible, because you're constantly fighting against primeval screams and moans. So to be able to communicate somewhat through language is through use of referential meanings like metaphor or simile. So we say it feels like, or it feels as if. And so like when you say it feels like somebody's drilling a hole into my hip, then it sort of gives us some sort of visions, the visual image in your head with the drill and certain pressure and maybe perhaps color and stuff. So through that, then we can share somewhat of your experience with others. But then again, it's just pure language. What does that really mean? And what does it mean when somebody says, you know, my pelvis is crashing in itself, or there's a stabbing, it's stabbing in there? Well, what does that really mean until you actually experience something like that yourself, or somehow get a different sort of referential, different references, like through metaphors, or for my sake, it's use of imagery. So I could just show you a certain image of being stabbed and there's no word involved, and people will go, that's more meaningful to me than somebody telling me I'm being stabbed. But to be able to communicate, there is this lost in translation. And when the medical system is trying to objectify what is essentially subjective experience, that huge chasm in between the subjective and objective, in that process, what are we losing in there? We're losing our humanness whilst you're transforming it into objective thing.
Yeah, it's taking away that individuality and that personal experience. It's really concerning on those sort of tick box exercises, isn't it? So we need to allow people to, you know, express in the best way for them that we have understood, and not say, well, okay, that's drilling, so not to 10. That's what it still comes back down to. So I think you're right, and it's not, you know, it's not one size fits all. No one has quite the same experience with pain, and I think it's recognizing that. And I think this is a really exciting project that you're doing, and I think inflicting pain on other individuals is a fantastic idea, but also for them to work out how on earth some of you manage to carry on with daily activities when you're undergoing such, you know, horrendous sensations. So it's really exciting, and be interested to follow that.
Listen, guys, I think we're going to wrap things up, but just before we go, what would be, Eugenie, what would be a take-home message for people watching this video about managing endometriosis?
Managing endometriosis? Oh, I'm not sure if I qualify.
Well, from a personal experience, I mean, you know, what would you like take-home message? So someone's watching this who maybe struggling, like, you know, what would you, what would be a take-home message to them for them to sort of take action or something?
Yeah, I would say what you experience is real. And I was also told that. Pretty much everyone from Body Mind told me that your experience is real. And that was the first time I actually heard that from people. And I would say I believe you. And I'm sorry that you have been experiencing such pain. Yeah. And even just to be heard that it is real, I think that is a huge step for towards healing process.
Okay, thank you very much. And Katie, so if someone contacted you or your organisation, what would be a take-home message to them?
Well, again, I mean, yeah, we have some women health specialists. It's again listening, advising, helping, guiding. So all of those things, and you know, but really the key is listening and hearing.
Yeah. And also there's another thing I really, really want to say is, you know, as somebody who's been living with pain for such a long time, I know I can manage my pain, and that took really long time, but it's the way that I view clinicians is that I don't expect them to fix me. And I know a lot of clinicians have this sense of obligation, and they have this expectation from themselves, and that they need to fix people. But when it comes to somebody who's been living with persistent pain, I think the approach has to be slightly different. It's more of I see them as my partner, my collaborators, that I present such a tangle of mess, right? All this stabbing and, pulsing and all those feeling on top of this loneliness and helplessness and all of that. And I present it all to you, and then help me to make sense of it. So that's how I see the clinician's job, to help me to detangle a little bit. Just let's work on it together. And then I'll take that home with me, and I'll try to make sense of it all.
So if you're a clinician watching this, you're a healthcare professional watching this, listen to that take-home message there, because that's powerful, really. It's funny enough, someone asked me this morning on Twitter, how do I suffering with chronic pain? Do you think you're responsible for your health? And I replied, said, well, number one, I don't suffer, and I haven't got chronic pain. Well, what I do is I actually manage my pain. I manage persistent pain. I work in partnership with my healthcare team with the health conditions that I have, So, hey, listen, Eugenie, it's been fantastic actually seeing you. I know we spoke to, before on Messenger a few years ago, and it's great to see you actually in person. So I'd like to thank you very much for your time. I know it's your evening there down here in Australia, so I appreciate you staying up. And Katie, thanks very much for taking part, being my little co-pilot here this morning, doing a bit of somebody interviewing as well. So perhaps we can do a few more like that as well. So listen, guys, stick around. I'm just going to stop the recording, but just stick around, okay? Thanks everybody for watching another Pain Toolkit recording interview. Listen, there's going to be a load more throughout 2021. So, we look forward to. Hey, listen, if you've got someone there you want to put forward, we should interview and they can tell us about if they're living with pain, they're self-managing their pain. Are you a healthcare professional who helps people to self-manage their pain? Let me know. Let's do an interview with you. Okay, take care, guys. See you again. Ciao.